Have you ever heard someone say that an older prospect has a lower ceiling because of their age? Well, that's not necessarily true, but I don't believe that an older prospect is just necessarily a lesser prospect. In fact, I think older prospects can be a very good thing, and I think we have a lot of recent examples of that, and I think we have a lot of future upcoming examples of that as well, including in the 2024 NBA Draft, which is why this video now is going to exist. I'm very excited to talk about some of these prospects, so hopefully you guys do enjoy today's video. Again, welcome back to Utility Sports. Hopefully you guys do enjoy it. Leave a like and subscribe if you do. And let's jump into it here now with a video preview. What exactly are we breaking down in this one? First of all, we're going to look at why older prospects are a good thing. There's 3 different standpoints or perspectives I want to highlight in this video. First of all, the evaluation standpoint, looking at how we can evaluate prospects who are older and how that is a benefit in the evaluation process compared to just cycling in freshman prospects every single season. We're also going to look at the developmental component, the developmental standpoint here as to why prospects who maybe are labeled with false ceilings or low ceilings or no upside, why that's not necessarily true. We'll look at old examples, we'll look at some recent examples, and we'll look at examples from this year's draft that I think can apply to that as well. And then we're also going to talk about the financial standpoint. This is one of my favorite components of this video. The CBA has an important role in team building in the NBA. For those of you who understand the CBA, you'll understand why drafting an older prospect could actually be a really good tool for building a good competitive roster, trying to win games in the NBA, not only now, but over their 6, 7, 8 years in the league that they start their career with. So we're going to talk about that as well in this video. Let's actually jump into it here now. With the evaluation standpoint, there's 3 components I want to touch on here from an evaluation perspective. First of all, I think it's a lot easier to be very accurate and very precise when you're scouting in older prospect. First of all, you have way more film. You have 3 or 4 years to go back on for some of these draft prospects just from their collegiate film. Then you add in their AAU, EYBL, all of their high school basketball film. You're looking at 6 or 7 years typically of good high-level film to evaluate and to really understand a prospect. If they've played 100 collegiate games, you're going to know who this player is very, very well. Now, it doesn't mean that they're fully defined in their NBA career. It doesn't mean you know everything about the player, but you have a much better picture of who that prospect actually is. So the more film, the better. That's one of the biggest things from my overall thought process and evaluation is the more you watch a player, the more you know about them. And for older prospects, there's a lot more to watch. There's been a lot more time to watch them. There's a lot more games to have watched them play in. And with the way that the NBA now works in the draft combine, you're probably going to see draft prospects in multiple draft combines. We've seen that already in the past with a few. I think Leonard Miller is a great example, who was in the draft process in the 2022 NBA draft, ended up withdrawing his name and then waited until the 2023 NBA draft to come out. That's just more exposure, and with this also comes more experience. Players have played through more late game scenarios. They've played through different systems, different situations, different settings. They've played against more opponents. They've played against different styles and schemes. They've faced more people, and that's just something that's going to probably advance where they're at when they come into the league. There's going to be a little bit more of that pro-ready style in their game where they've seen it, lived it, done it. They're probably ready for NBA minutes. Now, that's not always true, but likely most players who are a bit older are a little bit more mature, a little bit more ready to step into NBA minutes. And I think a great example of that is Jaime Jaquez for the Miami Heat. He stepped in, was one of the brightest rookies immediately upon arriving into the NBA because he came in with an NBA-ready body, an NBA-ready approach, a good maturity about him, and a built-out NBA skill set. A player who, listen, he had a very well-built-out stride stop, can knock down jump shots. Talented player, Jaime Jaquez is. And I think off of that, when you're evaluating a player like that, looking at the functionality of their skills, all of the tools that they possess, that is really the most important thing to evaluate instead of just looking at their age. Moving on to our next point, the developmental standpoint. This is where a lot of people really get confused when they're talking about older prospects. A player is not done growing, is not done developing at the age of 21, 22, even 23 years old. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, they have a lesser ceiling at that point. That is just not true as well. There's a lot of examples that can point that to being not the case. For example, a player who's 22, 23 years old playing college basketball, you're going to expect that player to probably produce and perform at a higher level than an 18 or 19-year-old college level player. And that's completely fair, but that 18 or 19-year-old college player might not have actual more skills that would translate to the NBA. For example, a 22-year-old player like a Marcus Sasser last year had more functional skills than Killian Hayes when Killian Hayes came into the league as a teenager. A player who can fit and work in the NBA is going to be based off of their skill set and not just their age. And some examples of players who have really progressed since their 21st birthday, for example, Jalen Williams of the Oklahoma City Thunder, a player where I've learned a lot about draft theory, draft strategy, evaluation by how I evaluated Jalen Williams, things that I did wrong in my evaluation on him specifically, and areas for me to grow and learn as an evaluator, and I feel like he's taught me a lot. Jalen Brunson, I think another great example. He was the college basketball player of the year, led Villanova to a national championship, and yet he was a second round pick. Dallas grabbed him, never looked back, obviously was a huge home run for them. He was a part of leading them to a conference finals, and then they did not keep him, but we've seen him develop a ton throughout his NBA career, just adjusting to the NBA game, playing with a little bit more pace, more spacing around him. He has continuously gotten better and better and better, including after signing with the New York Knicks, put into a different situation with a higher volume, a higher load responsibility, and since then he's gotten even better. Jalen Green, I think, is a great example of this. He was drafted as a teenager, so you might be saying, why is he on this list? He's a 22-year-old currently, and over the last couple of weeks, he's played the best basketball of his career. But are we really going to expect him to not get any better from where he currently is? I think that would be ridiculous. I think a lot of people expect Jalen Green to continue improving as a player. So why do we not think that way for a college player who's 21 or 22 years old? There is still time and room and growth for development. And I think that when we look at it through that lens of, okay, we're not expecting a 22-year-old to be a finished product, then why would we expect that for a draft prospect? Because once they get into the NBA with NBA coaching, NBA strength training, NBA dietitians, all of those elements that are going to contribute to development and growth and physical improvement as well as actual skill set improvement, these players are going to get a heck of a lot better, not to mention Michael Jordan, who was a multi-year college player, obviously one of the greatest to ever play the sport. It's just silly to look at it from a perspective of a 21, 22, 23-year-old kid not being able to get any better. It's just not the reality of the world that we live in. Also, development should be viewed through the lens of functionality of their tools and skills, not just their age. And I think looking at a player like Hasheem Thabeet, that's a great example, and one I just haven't been able to get out of my head today. Hasheem Thabeet was a young, intriguing upside prospect, but he lacked feel, and he just didn't really have the actual functionality behind any of his tools or skills. Everyone looked at him because he was huge, tall, long, lengthy, and athletic, but he wasn't a good basketball player. Whereas you compare that to someone like Tristan da Silva playing for Colorado or Dalton Knecht playing for Tennessee, these guys win based off of skill. They're players who have functional basketball skill sets when it comes to shooting the basketball, putting the ball on the deck, creating for others, something Tristan da Silva does pretty well. He's a relatively fluid athlete. And Dalton Knecht, a high volume scorer right now in college, but when we look at his portability to the NBA, you're likely going to look at him as a shooter, a floor stretcher, something that is extremely important in the modern game of basketball. So Tristan da Silva, Dalton Knecht, they have more functional tools and more functional skills than Hasheem Thabeet, despite Thabeet being younger and having what we would probably relatively look at as skills and tools. They're just not as functional. So the functionality is really the important part of looking at prospects through an evaluation and development standpoint. If you're going to draft someone and hope that they develop, there has to be something functional there for them to work off of. Thabeet didn't have functionality. Tristan da Silva, Dalton Knecht, in my opinion, do. And I think that's why they're going to be successful NBA players. I'm not saying they're going to be all-stars. I'm not saying they're going to be all NBA caliber players. but they're going to be able to grow and develop early in their NBA careers until their probable mid-20s or late 20s in some instances. Then when we talk about the CBA and evaluating it from a financial standpoint, there's a few things to look at. First of all, the first contract is going to be very cheap because it's their rookie deal. So when you're drafting a 23-year-old prospect, let's talk about it through Dalton Knecht's standpoint. Knecht is going to be 23 years old by draft day. With that being the case, his 4-year rookie contract, assuming he's a first-round pick, will be for his age 23, age 24, age 25, and age 26 season. That is great. You're going to get the beginning of his prime in a rookie contract. So when you're talking about team building, having Dalton Knecht playing for $9 million, $10 million, whatever the number ends up being, that's relatively cheap for where the mid-level exception is currently at, where other talented players are kind of slated right now based on how the cap has grown. NBA TV deals, obviously, we've seen massive inflation in the NBA for the payment of players, and that's a great thing for the players. Not going to really spend too much time on that topic, but having Dalton Knecht making below the mid-level exception is going to be really great for whatever team drafts him, in my opinion. Secondly, though, this is really where you see the big-time benefits from a CBA perspective. The second contract is also going to be cost-controlled, assuming you're not drafting a high-end star or someone who, yes, he's 22, 23 years old and blossoms into a top-end player. You're going to get restricted free agency status for a player like Dalton Knecht. So not only through his age 26 season do you have him on a rookie contract, but his age 27, 28, 29, 30, age 31 season, you could theoretically have him at, again, a pretty cost-controlled value because he will be a restricted free agent. Very likely that he would not get offered in restricted free agency, just with the way that restricted free agency works in the modern NBA. Very rarely do players get offered contracts. Look at PJ Washington this past offseason before re-signing with the Hornets. Obviously, he's now been traded to Dallas, but if you're looking at the contract PJ Washington's playing on, having a player throughout the rest of their prime, in Dalton Knecht's case, on a contract in the teens for millions of dollars is going to be great. And then by the time they hit their third contract, the player's already into their 30s. It makes it a lot easier for a team to stomach losing them. You've already had them for 8 or 9 years. It's okay to let that player go at that point because he's already going to be 31, 32 years old. You've already had the best years of his career. He's going to start to decline more than likely. Now, again, modern science, the NBA players are playing later into their careers. LeBron James is an anomaly. We're not going to use him as an example, but there's a lot of players right now playing into their mid to late 30s. So you could argue that, yes, that third contract is still very important, and I definitely agree with that. But it's, when you're looking at it from a team building perspective, drafting a good player now who you know is going to be a quality player for the next 7-8 years, like a Dalton Knecht, has a lot of cost benefits when it comes to your cap table, as well as just adding talent onto your roster. And then the third thing, and this is a really tricky situation right now to talk about, but avoid committing to an extension for a lesser proven player. I have Jonathan Kuminga here on the graphic. Now, I don't think Jonathan Kuminga is unproven. I'm not trying to say Jonathan Kuminga is bad. In fact, I think Jonathan Kuminga is very, very good. The big question for me, though, is what does his contract look like this offseason when he becomes extension eligible, and will the Warriors even extend him this offseason? I think the answer to that is no, and the reason why, it's hard to really pinpoint a value that Jonathan Kuminga is worth right now. If you're Jonathan Kuminga's agent, you're probably going to be asking for a max extension, a rookie max extension. And if you're the Golden State Warriors, you might say, listen, Kuminga, we love you, we think you're an awesome player, we drafted you in the top 10, we want you to be here long term, but a max? Are you sure? There's doubt around this, where teams aren't exactly certain that he's going to live up to that number, that he's going to live up to that contract, and there's just more uncertainty. And the reason why Jonathan Kuminga, who was drafted as a teenager, still has a lot of room to grow, but maybe he never lives up to some of that potential. Whereas if this contract came around when he was 24, 25, 26 years old, we'd have a much better idea who he is as a player, where he's really going to be at that time, and what his career outlook really is going to play like. And because of that, the contract extension becomes a lot easier to navigate, discuss, and figure out. Whereas with Kuminga, again, it's going to be a tricky situation for Golden State. With Klay Thompson also being a free agent this summer, Steph Curry already on the books, Draymond Green on the books, Andrew Wiggins on the books. They have Chris Paul's expiring contract. Golden State has a lot to figure out from a financial perspective. Kuminga's contract is a big question mark for them. Look back to how the Jordan Poole thing played out. There's a lot of questions right now for Golden State around Kuminga's contract extension, in my opinion. And it's not about whether or not they want to keep him. It's about how much is he worth and what number is appropriate to give him. And the answer might be that they don't even extend him at all because they'll wait to restricted free agency where they have a little bit more leverage. They would have the ability to wait for another team to offer him. Now, you do risk kind of making your player mad by doing that, but at the same time, it mitigates your actual financial risk of giving a big contract to a player who maybe doesn't live up to that figure down the road. So that's another benefit of drafting an older prospect, is you kind of avoid this whole mess, because when Dalton Knecht becomes extension eligible, he'll be 26 or 27 years old. So you're looking at a player who we already know who he is at that point. He's already in the prime of his career, and you can justify paying him because you're paying him for the extended prime of his career. Whereas Kuminga right now, even though Kuminga is a better player, better prospect than Dalton Knecht ever is or ever was, there's still more uncertainty when it comes from the CBA, and that's a big deal in my opinion. So our takeaways. Listen, I'm not saying all old prospects are going to be great. I'm just saying don't discredit their upside if they pass the eye test and have functional tools that will get them on an NBA floor. Again, Jalen Brunson is a great example. I have Chris Duarte here on the screen as a player who I never loved during his draft. And the reason why, I just didn't see the functional tools that separated him from other NBA caliber wings. I didn't see the upside with him. Now, he came into the league and set the league on fire pretty quickly with Indiana because he was older than all of the other rookies, more NBA ready like we talked about earlier, but it doesn't also always mean that he's going to develop and grow. And in Chris Duarte's case, he didn't have the functionality, the skills, the tools to actually grow as an NBA player, whereas someone like Jalen Brunson did and a bunch of other prospects who were in their 20s already when they were drafted, they had more upside, more tools to work with. And it's not about their age, it's about the tools that they have. For me, evaluation of talent and feel and the usage of tools should always supersede the age of a prospect. Not every 19-year-old is going to be better in 3 years than the 22-year-old. That's just not how it's going to work. And in fact, a lot of the time, the 21, 22-year-old's a safer bet because you already know what they're going to be. Think back to the Jerome Robinsons of the world, players who were taken very high, Sekou Doumbouya. There's a lot of examples of players who were perceived with upside, but the actual collection of usable tools, functional tools, was not there. So when you're scouting, scout a player, not their birth certificate, and draft good basketball players. When I'm evaluating someone like Zach Edey, first of all, I can tell you Zach Edey is a good basketball player. Now, I'm a little bit more gun-shy on Edey currently. I'm not like Jonathan Givony, and I don't have him hovering around the lottery. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say, well, 22-year-old Zach Edey, which is what he's going to be on the day of the draft, is worth a lottery pick in this year's draft. But what I will say is Zach Edey's a relatively easier scout than some freshman prospects right now, than maybe a Carlton Carrington, for example, out of Pittsburgh. And the reason why, I've got multiple years of film on Zach Edey that really give me a good picture of who this player is, what his development track record already looks like, and we also already know from a large sample size of games what his strengths and weaknesses are. We know he's absolutely huge. He's got a lot of the physical tools you're looking for from a big man in terms of height, weight, strength. He rolls downhill very hard. He's going to draw a ton of fouls in the NBA. We know what Zach Edey is going to be good at. We also know some of the things he's not going to be good at. I think the lateral mobility is a big question. Is there any way you can play him in pick and roll coverage other than drop defense? And my answer to that's probably not. So there's some limitations there as well, but we know he's good at basketball. And I think that's one thing that, like, even if the upside's not there with Zach Edey as much, we at least know that his floor is probably not out of the league. Whereas some of the other prospects who are 18, 19 years old currently, that's a little bit more up in the air. Not, again, guaranteed that they'll be out of the league, but I think from an evaluation standpoint, it's sometimes safer, a little bit easier to evaluate the older prospects. There's less boom or bust involved with them. And partially the reason why these 19-year-olds are perceived to have more upside is the players who come out at 19 years old, like the Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatums of the world, Luka Doncic's of the world, they're already pinned and poised as top 5 picks in the draft. Everyone knows that these guys are going to step into the league and dominate pretty quickly. Anthony Edwards coming out of Georgia. He was 18, 19 years old. Everyone loved his game already. There's no reason for him to stay at Georgia. Zach Edey, 3 years ago, he was not NBA ready at all, and he's improved a ton since then. So there's a reason too that when you're looking at some of these 22-year-olds, there's a reason they didn't come out 3 years ago. And it's because the fact that now they've worked on their game and have really enhanced who they are as players, they've taken some of those steps and developmental growth forward into becoming an NBA draft prospect. And then also from there, there's still room to grow in some of the cases, whereas other players like Chris Duarte, there's just less kind of low-hanging fruit for them to improve upon and to grow into as basketball players. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I hope you enjoyed looking at the 3 different perspectives I had from the evaluation standpoint, the CBA standpoint, and also the developmental standpoint. It was a lot of fun to talk about. Again, draft good basketball players. Dribble, pass, shoot. Look at the functionality of their skills, their tools. It's more than just size, length, and athleticism. Those things are important too, but put together an overall picture on who a player is. What areas do you think that they can impact winning in the NBA? In which ways do you think it's reasonable for them to get better and improve their game? It might just be making a timely pass. It's not everything has to be this grandiose, huge scale development. It's going to be, hey, they got better in this small area. So I hope you guys did enjoy. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Make sure to check out some of those other videos up on the channel, and we'll catch you in the very next utility sports video.